Well, welcome back to another video in my series about creating a tabletop sports game. I know I haven't done much with this series for a while, but I just wanted to. I'm in sort of redevelopment of a game, and so some of these thoughts are just fresh in my head, so I wanted to make sure I get them down on video real quick, just so I don't forget them, because I'll forget to come back and do this. So I'm just thinking about what, kind of what's beyond the game. So we've been talking about actually just creating the game, but there's so many more things beyond the game itself. So there's, obviously, what is the game? How's it going to play? Can you do the complete game? So that's sort of one big major part, right? If you don't have this as number one, then you don't have a game. But there's so many other things to think about concerning finishing a game, releasing a game that you could actually play. So just thinking through a few of the things that I've thought about. So rosters, whether you're going to use actual rosters or you're going to zoom in a little bit here. Are you going to use actual rosters or are you going to use fictional rosters? But you need players, right? You need players in order to play a game. So it's not just how do I get the game to work itself? How do I translate it? But you need rosters of some sort. And then you've got to be able to get those rosters from your computer or your head or whatever it is, generating new rosters, some way to get those rosters out to the general public. And if you're going to use rosters that have already been created or actual players, how are those players going to fit into your game? So it's the rare game that can just take a roster, plop it into the game, and then it just works. You need some way to connect those players to the game engine. So it's not quite as easy as, 1, 2, 3, bing, bang, boom. You've got to figure out if you're going to use real players, what part of that player as far as ratings, are you going to rate them individually? Are you going to rate them collectively as a team or as a unit? And then how do those ratings fit into the game engine itself? And then if you're going to use fictional players, the same things apply. Are you going to use fictional statistics or are you going to individually rate those fictional players? And then how do you do that? Do you have a system for rating those individual players? Is it just you sitting down and looking at their stats and saying, I think that one is a 4 or that one is a -2 or whatever it is? You need some sort of systematic way to deal with each player or each unit or each team so that you can then put them into the flow of the game, the game engine, to distinguish each different player, unit, or team from one another. So that's another huge component of the game, is once you have the game engine worked out so that the sport itself works, now you need to plug in. Most gamers are going to expect to be able to play either with fictional or actual rosters and players and teams. So that's a huge component, is how do you deal with rosters? How are you going to get those players into some sort of playable form? So are they going to be cards? Are they going to be roster sheets? Is it online? Like how are you going to distribute those players so that they get sort of brought in together with the game engine? I like to use carded players, but I've done teams. There's any number of ways that you can do it. It needs to make sense for the game engine. It needs to make sense for the gamer. Are they going to want to cut out a bunch of cards, or is it better to have sheets of just line after line, like a spreadsheet of players, or is it okay to do cards but on sheets? And then that's sort of how you do it. So that's up to you to decide those things and to figure them out for your audience, I guess. Another thing to think about is how will you deliver? How are you going to deliver the game? Will it be cards that you print at your house and then you send those cards, like someone purchases them and then you just sort of do print on demand inside your own home? Will you do print on demand through a service? Will you send a bunch of, a big order to a printer and you do a run of 200 or something like that, where they print the entire game for you, and maybe they cut them, maybe they don't. And if, will they cut them or will they not cut them? And then they ship them to you, and then people order from you, and then you distribute that, you send out that game. Or will you do PDF only? My games have been up to this point strictly PDF, so you can actually purchase on the website, and then get those files instantaneously emailed to you. So, will it be with delivery? Is how will people pay for the game, or how will they get the game? Will you use PayPal? Will you use check? Will you use a credit card? Will you use a processing service? You have to have a processing service to do those things, what they call a merchant account, or a merchant gateway that processes those payments. They take their cut off the top. We have a website. Will you go through Facebook? Will you go through social media? There's any number of ways. I use a company called PayHip, which has been really great. They'll do digital downloads, and they also do they do actual fulfillment in some way too, like selling. You can sell physical products as well, and also courses, or education type things. So they have a variety of different offerings. They're out of the UK, and I've had no issues whatsoever with them. They've been really great. It's very modern. They use Stripe. They use PayPal. So they basically take all forms of payment that you want to take, and they take their cut off of every purchase, and then the rest is mine. So that's it's been really good, actually. I was surprised. I did a lot of research before I went into this about what's the best way to go. I would encourage you to use them if you just have no idea what to do. Look at PayHip, PAYHIP.com. So payment, distribution, these are like, and fulfillment, I guess, is part of the distribution process. So how are you going to fulfill the orders that come in for the game if you're selling the game? Or even if you're just giving the game away for free, how are you going to deliver it to the user, to the end customer? There's a place called drivethroughcards.com that does print on demand. There are a couple of others that do some print on demand just for games. Will you raise money through Indiegogo or some other sort of crowdfunding type thing, where you get the money first, you print the games, and then you distribute the games to the people who have pre-purchased the games? So there's lots of different ways to do it these days, but you need to figure out what is your sort of logistics chain. What is your system? Okay, I need to upload the game. I need to put it somewhere. I need to do, that's another part. What do you do? What do you have for marketing? How are you going to market the game? How are you going to tell people about the game? Marketing, advertising. What will you do to spread the word about your game? these are all things to consider as you're building them. Another part I thought about was, what about components? Do you have components that are going to be not the cards for the players and not the game engine, but do you have extra things? So like I'm looking over here, and you know, this is a component for a new basketball game that I have called Triple Threat Basketball, right? So this is a game clock that I had to make from scratch and had to think about, you know, how much time and what everything is going to look like. I've got some timeouts in here for TV timeouts. So there's a little bit of explanation down here for end of game situations and timeouts. And do you need to create a whole new score sheet? So I've done that for this game as well. You can see I created my own score sheet that comes with the game as well. So there are different components that maybe you need to add to the game or you need to create. These are components for another game that I had. The game is called Quick Play Baseball, and what this is a situation card. You flip it and that's the situation for that inning, and then you got to resolve the situation. So how to create 50 or 60 of those different situations. So what other sort of external components, external to the game engine itself and to the cards, do you need to create and then bundle together and distribute with the game? So with the basketball, you get the score sheet, you get the timer, you know, whether you use those things or not, those are distributed with the game. Will you also make those a free download when the person goes to the website? Can they just download those components for free, or do they have to go and buy the game to get those components? Those are sort of some decisions that you need to make as well. You know, with the basketball game, there are a couple of different ways that you can go. You know, I've created this sort of just the bottom part where you actually play the game, and then I also have this sort of tall card. So that would come, you can see it's almost the same height as two of these together. So these come, you know, 4 or 5 to a sheet. These come 4 across and 3 down, so 12 to a sheet. So you get 12 players on here. But both of these are actually included in the game. So you would get this player card. It would be blank up here because I can't sell or distribute those photos for a fee. I don't own a license to sell them or make money off of them. So I just sort of provide them for free if you want to use them, but it's not required to play the game. Just totally aesthetic. But this part is required, and this is the proprietary part of the game. So you can just cut these out if you want to save space, save paper, whatever you want to do. Or you can print the tall cards with nothing at the top, or you can print them with the players. So that's sort of, but this is an extra component on top of the other whole production of the tall cards, right? Those are two different sort of production lines that I had to create. And obviously you're sort of copying and pasting, but but you still have to figure out, you know, how are these things going to print, and I have to include them in. I have to name them something. That's another part, is file naming, so that people clearly know which file, what's in each file. So there's lots of like little different parts that are specialized components that you have for each game. Let's see, this is another game I was working on, and you can see here, these are all, it's just like a little mock-up of the game. You have different football players. This is a college football game that I've kind of been dinking around with, where you can do some recruiting and stuff like that, but every player needs to be carded, right? So I had to I had to cut players, and I had to cut coaches, and I had to cut out, let's see, different types of players that needed to be included. Different types of coaches that are in the game already. So you just sort of have all these components that you need to design and you need to create, and they're integral parts of the game that you just need to include, that are not part of the actual playing the game, but they're sort of the peripheral components that are required to play the game. Are there any other components? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that was on my mind as far as that's concerned. One thing I will say is a system. So, do you have a system for creating new seasons or for creating new sets? So, a lot of these sports-driven games are driven by a season at a time, right? Or they're driven by all-star game sets or greatest player sets or decade sets or whatever it is. They're sort of sold and driven by these kind of contained units of players and statistics and stuff like that. So do you have a system in place so that you can, as quickly as possible, it may not always be quick or easy, but as quickly and efficiently as possible, can you recreate all of the components, all of the players, their ratings, everything? Have you systematized that? So it's one thing to create a one-off card that you've manually gone through and placed everything. Can you then systematize that? Can you scale it to a baseball game might have as many as 1,000 players? If you card or you include every single player, even back in the olden days, you're still going to wind up with, I don't know, several dozen players that are going to be a part of the batters, and then there's going to be several dozen, if not hundreds, of batters and pitchers combined. You get into a modern baseball season, you're talking about every single player that's played. You're talking about in the thousands, so multiple thousands, so 2,000 or 3,000 players that you need to include. So going through and doing each of those players and manipulating their statistics and stuff by hand, or manipulating their cards by hand, is just, it's going to be an impossibility. You'll spend your whole life on one season. And there are different ways that you can use to sort of systematize the way that you deal with these cards. I use Excel and Excel formulas in order to create sort of a database sheet with all my players and all of their statistics and names and teams and all that kind of stuff. So I dump everything into a database, so to speak, and then I use another sheet for the output of the cards. So using different formulas and referencing back to that database, I'm able to pull that data into another sheet and then insert that data into a card. Now, I've had some help from the community, and maybe you'll just need that too, to better utilize and be more efficient at using something like an Excel, or if you have a graphics program, you might just need somebody's help to be more efficient at using it. You can also pay someone to do that work for you. Go to Fiverr or whatever, and there are people who will do that as a freelance project for you. And once they get it all set up, paying them to do another season should be easier because it's all systematized for them. So they should just be able to sort of start a new spreadsheet, dump the data, and then push new seasons or new cards or whatever out. That's how it works for me. And got almost every game that I've done works just like that. The basketball game is a little bit more manual, and the football game I have coming out is going to be a lot more manual, so it's a little bit more time and effort, but it's also more complex, so it's not as easy to just sort of dump the data and push out to the cards. The baseball games are a little easier. So these are just some of the things I'm thinking about: rosters, how we deliver the files, or how we deliver the cards or the product, sort of logistics. How will the customers pay if you're selling it? But even if you're not selling it, how are you going to know? Sort of taking orders sometimes involves money, sometimes it doesn't involve money, but there still needs to be a process in place for people to say, hey, I want this, and for you to receive that and then be able to send it to them somehow. What will you do for marketing? How are you going to let people know about the game so that they can go try it? Are there any extra components that are sort of peripheral to the actual gameplay itself, or the peripheral to the game engine and the players who are playing the game? And then, have you systematized your game effort so that it can be easily replicated over and over to create new seasons or new sets, or however you've set it up? Typically, I do everything by hand first, unless I just know that it's kind of like a little bit similar to something I've already done, and I just know how to do that. But for the most part, I will just create like this. I'm just going to go through and physically write on each card, and I'm going to create those things, even if it's digitally. I'm going to fill them in manually, maybe one team or two teams, just to be able to have those to play. And then after that, once I've got the layout the way I want it, now I can begin to sort of figure out how can I systematize this input, or the output of the cards, I guess. The output of the cards, the output of any specialized game engine charts or game components or pieces. So those are all big considerations, because with a game you have to do everything. It's like writing a computer program, which is why this feels so normal to me, because it's like building a web page. It's designed in a lot of ways, but it's designed from zero. So you literally have to think about every single thing that the user is doing, that the gamer is doing with the game, and are there ways that you can facilitate the enjoyment of the game, the ease of playing the game. I've built applications before, web applications, to sort of speed up the game and to be a helper to use with the game, just because it'll save on people's wrists and hands just from having to roll too many times. So that's a particular skill set that I have, but you could obviously pay someone to do that. Others have done that before, or find someone in the community who would love to help you with that, and see if they'll build a little application for you to roll the dice and to do the different things. So or a card flipper or whatever it is. So if you have some special skills like that, or you have marketing contacts, or you might have special skills somewhere throughout here. You might be an Excel pro, and that part of systematizing might not be the hard part for you, but it is something that does need to be set up at some point in the process. So hopefully this is helpful to you, just to sort of think through not just the game itself, not just how it plays, but to think through the full process. Once you finish the game, that you're not finished. Now the kind of the real work begins, and there's a lot of this sort of peripheral stuff that has to happen before you go out. Do you have a logo? Do you have a name? Do you have when somebody says, tell me about your game, do you know what to say? What makes it special or different or unique, or whatever it is. These are all things you got to kind of think about. Even at a low level, even if you're just sort of giving the game away, you got to have a way to distribute that game, because you're probably not walking up on the street and handing people your game or an envelope with your game in it. So you got to be able to get it to them somehow. So modern problems, business problems. If you don't like business and you don't want to deal with business problems, it's even going to be more difficult for you at this point. But even if you're not selling it, you still have to solve some business logistical problems. So just a few things to think about. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below, and I will, sort of like gradually add to this series over time. I know it's been a while, probably almost a year, I guess, since I've done something with this, and hopefully it's helpful to you. Just is just my experience of dealing with, building tabletop games today, when, I didn't build them 50 years ago and build out a logistics chain and, have different people that I can use and have been using for a long time. So I'm figuring this out as someone who's making these today, and what sort of business processes are expected by the market today. So hopefully it's helpful for you if you want to venture out and, make a game yourself and then distribute it to others. Hopefully it's a helpful series for you. All right, subscribe to the channel, and if you haven't already, and get more content. If you want to share it with a friend, that would be super helpful. If you don't want to share it but you want to help out, just click that thumbs up. It's super easy. And check out the rest of the videos in this series, if you haven't already, on how to create a tabletop baseball game. I think that's all from here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.